The sun has left and forgotten
Your
me.
stories don't define
It's
you,
dark,
but how you tell them will.
cannot
Hi, I'm Sarah
see.
Elkins, your host and chief
Why does
storymaker
this
at
rain
Elkins
pour down?
Consulting.
I'm gonna
Whether you're sharing business
drown
stories or
in
personal
a
stories,
sea
how you share them matters.
of deep
What we
confusion.
tell people changes how they perceive us, and the stories we tell can really make a difference in how you want people to understand who you are. So today's episode is featuring my new friend, Christopher Parsons. We met on LinkedIn a while back, and his tagline is the silent CEO. And being a more talkative person, I was really interested and intrigued to hear what this is about. And I have noticed that when I allow myself quiet, my brain starts to function a little differently. I'll give you an example. Just a couple days ago, I was hiking on the mountain near our home, and I stopped for a second to look down at my phone, which I don't usually do
Mm.
when I'm hiking. But in the same instant that I went to look at my phone, I heard this, and it sounded almost like a dog panting.
Mm-hmm.
And I immediately put my phone away in my pocket and I looked up, and it was a bird flying over my head, and it was so quiet that I could hear its wings.
Wow.
So, Christopher, thank you for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to hearing how you work and the stories of how you've applied this in your own life and helped others to apply this idea about being silent to find your best self.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah, for having me on this podcast. Hello, Montana, as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have listeners from all over the world, so it's always a pleasure to know that
Yeah.
people right here in Montana are also listening. So, thank you. So, to begin, as you know, I love to ask my guests to share something about themselves that most people don't know about them. And the reason I do this is that, especially now, we have a tendency to see people in one light
Mm.
and then label them with a label that may not fit across the board because we're complicated. Humans are
Yes.
complicated.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So, by sharing something about yourself that most people don't know, it gives our audience an opportunity to hear something about you that they wouldn't find on your bio or your LinkedIn profile or even in a lot of the work you do. So, what do you
Yeah.
think?
Great. So, I would say the one thing that most people don't know about me is that I am a railway enthusiast, or I should say railroad enthusiast for our American
Oh,
listeners. I think that's an important thing to point out for me because it's something I've always been interested in since I was a kid. Growing up in Oxford in the UK, we'd go out on car journeys and we'd go past this railway line time and time again. I'd never see trains on it. And I'd be intrigued, are there actually trains on this railway line? And it was like, it's not because you don't see something that it doesn't exist. I was always intrigued to I'd always hoped to see a train under this bridge in Oxford. We'd go on over in the car on our days out. And the first times I saw trains, it was like, wow, these things do exist. And that's that. And playing with this wooden train brand Brio, which I think you probably have in America too.
mhm.
That was also igniting the interest in trains. Then the visits to the steam train railways, books, Thomas the Tank Engine. But that was the kind of seed of it. Of course, in England, I don't know about in America, but in England, if you tell people you're a train enthusiast, people jump to the conclusion that you're a train spotter, as in the film Train Spotting. But I personally don't, or have never really been interested in numbers, sitting at the end of the platform or standing at the end of the platform, taking numbers down. For me, it was more just traveling by train, watching them, taking photos of them, reading about the history of trains and railways, uh, and so on. So I don't have as much time as I used to. Obviously, now I've got family, kids, work, etc. So I get the odd magazine now, or I show my kids books about trains. I don't expect them to grow up to be rail enthusiasts like I was. Um, and it's a means of transport I've always had an affinity with, and the romantic side of train travel visiting Grand Central Station, uh, going across Japan by train. My mum is from Japan, so 50% of me is Japanese, which is another thing I want to explore in my life actually now. So railways have always been in my life, through my life, no pun intended. Yeah.
Wow, that is surprising and beautiful. I love that you mentioned the romance that we associate with trains. And when you think about the first time you got to ride on a train,
Yeah.
do you have a memory of that?
That would be, oof, that that was probably in Japan actually, because I must have been very young. No, I probably went to visit my grandma in Bristol by train, which is about an hour and a half by train from Oxford. It was either Oxford, Bristol, or Japan when we got to Osaka with my mum and my little sister. We went from Osaka to the fishing village in Shikoku Prefecture, where my mum's family were. And that was a train journey because we had those koala chocolate biscuits. I remember eating
Yes.
them on the train. And I remember getting to the train station, getting to the train station in the village being picked up. I remember seeing trains in Japan, which of course Japan is known for. But my first journeys on trains were obviously magical, and that particularly eating biscuits, koala biscuits on the train because it was a long journey, and I thought Japan isn't that big, surely. So yeah, I remember that.
I love that.
Yeah.
There's something about trains and I agree. It, it if excuse me. What I love about hearing that story is how you describe it as if you are watching them now.
Yes.
So I can see it just I know our listeners are probably listening and not watching a video, but listeners, for your benefit, I'm going to describe this. As Christopher is talking about his love for trains, I can see that he's putting himself in a position of remembering driving over the train tracks on a bridge. I can picture him sitting on a train eating snacks with his little sister, because I know those little koala crackers, cookies with the chocolate in them. Um, and I can see that you're imagining it. You're putting yourself back
Mm.
in that
Yes.
place as you're describing it. And
Yeah.
I love that. I think
Mm.
the only times we really do that is when something is memorable enough and is associated with enough different parts of our senses
Yes.
that it becomes a very real and solid memory, even if it's fallible, even if
Yeah.
what you remember is different from what actually happened, which usually is the case. So
Mm.
thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
Hmm. So now it's it's kind of obvious to me that part of that love has translated into the work you do because I think about when I've ridden on trains, other than the sound of the train itself,
Mm.
it can be very quiet inside. Even even when I would commute on a train when I lived in Washington, D.C., and I would be on the train for 5 or 6 stops, and it was usually pretty quiet on the train. People would
Yeah.
either read their newspapers or now they look at their phones.
Yes.
And I remember being more aware of my own energy that I was experiencing
Mm.
in that quiet time on the train. So, when you think about the work you do, can you see a parallel or um, something about what you experience in your love for trains that you bring to your work?
Yeah, I would say that the main parallel I bring to my work is I'm giving people the opportunity in what I do to reskill themselves in the art of doing nothing more than just looking out of the window. So as you would look out of a train window or a bus window, but we're talking about trains, so why not a train window? Just the art of looking into the middle distance, looking out of a window and doing nothing else. When I go on a bus or a train here, I'm always looking at people and seeing what they're doing and just looking at how many people are on their phone compared to how many people are just looking out the window. And I think even if we end up dribbling because we're like in our thoughts, that's wonderful because we need to keep that. We need to keep that, savor those moments when we're just doing nothing except looking out the window. Because just being on our phones is scrolling, it's taking our attention away, our presence away, and our motivation as well, because we're just slaves to our phones or whatever distraction we've got. So just looking out the window, looking into the middle distance, I spend a lot of my time just looking out the window and looking around me in the street. And I think it's vitally important to keep that as humans.
I agree. I know that um, too many times when I'm scrolling on my phone that I'm consuming information, consuming content
Mm,
versus creating content or even considering what I'm reading or consuming and how it's affecting me and the people
yeah.
around me. Um, I really appreciate that, and I'm wondering, do you use that as an analogy when you're working with your clients, the
So
travel?
I use more the analogy of doing one activity. I'm just looking at you actually drinking your mug of whatever,
Coffee.
and I coffee, and I get what I do is I don't. It's not. What I do is I get people to do a simple activity and do nothing else but that activity. So in silence, and it's never about the silence of my work. My work is it uses silence. The silence is a tool, but it's what comes out of doing that activity in silence. And again, it's about reskilling ourselves in something that we used to do before we had all this technology around us of just doing one activity and nothing else. Because if you think about it today, we are very multi-skilled. We are poly polyvalent, as the French say. We're very good at doing 3,000 things at once. And that could be driving and looking at your phone. That could be you're being on your phone and cooking, being on your phone and washing up, being on your phone and something. So our brains are actually having to work double time because our brains are being split between two different activities. So it's obvious that we're going to lose focus on being able to do just one thing. And even if that one thing is making a cup of tea or looking out the window or reading a book, it's that reskilling ourselves, going back in time, as it were, to that luxury of just doing one thing at a time. And I use silence to help people realize the magic of doing that again. Because if we lose that ability to do one thing at a time, it's a great pity. And if you think about it, on a closing note here, it's not for nothing that we are constantly told to not be on our phones when driving. Yes, it's road safety, but it's also a blessing because if we just focus on the road, yes, it could be boring on a motorway or a freeway, as they say in America. Um, but it's concentrating our minds on one thing at a time. And that's how we can concentrate on being present with our families, our friends, our work, our business, and not have to split our minds between 3,000 things and we all do it. I do it. I try and read a book. I take a book and I take my phone with me. I think, why am I doing that? I want to read the book. So I put my phone away or I turn it off, but not always. So it's there. So it's tempting, I know, and it's maintaining that boundary as well for our sakes.
Well, that's immediately where I went is the reason it matters.
Mm,
It's not just because we need to be able to focus on one thing at a time. It's because if we can't, then we can't focus on our child
mm,
and we can't individually focus on our partner or individually focus on ourselves. And I never really thought about it that way, but if we lose that ability, it's not just losing the desire to do
Yeah.
it, but losing the ability to do it. And I'm reminded just briefly, I went outside yesterday. It was chilly out, but
Mm,
I wanted to wash the windows around our bay window because I knew when the sun came in, you could see from the inside how filthy it was.
mm,
So I had already moved everything from inside so I could clean the inside of the windows. And while I was getting ready and I was getting the step stool and the rags and the um, cleanser I was going to use,
mm.
I thought about putting in my earbuds so I could listen to music or a book while I was doing it. But for some reason, I stopped myself
Yeah.
and didn't do that. So when I was working on those windows, I really was fully consumed by it. And
Yes.
now, as I'm thinking about it, I'm really glad because I had a lot going through my head
Mm,
that I wouldn't have been thinking about if I had a book or a podcast or music
um,
going on.
no.
So thank you for that
Yeah.
reminder.
And two two things really is my temptation would be to read texts or play music during the work I do, but that is actually I decided taking people away from the aim, and the ultimate luxurious aim that I want people to have is the power to hear their heartbeat in their ears and nothing else. If nothing else happens during what I do with people who come to these sessions that I do, it's being able to rediscover the sound of the heartbeat in their ears and nothing else. That is the end goal, as well as all the other goals that I invite people to achieve, if you like.
So tell me, Christopher, when you think about how you got to this point, a moment in time when you realized that you needed it, and therefore it was likely that other people needed this kind of coaching, this kind of space to
Yeah,
leave things one
yeah.
quiet activity at a time. What was your experience with it that got you here?
I think the one of the first moments that got me doing what I do is my experience of bullying in high school in the UK. Obviously, it was a long time ago now, but silence was a way of processing what was going on. It was also a buffer between me and what was going on, what I was feeling, what I was experiencing, what I was going through on a regular basis. It gave me a chance to hide, but also just, yeah, process what was going on. And yes, it was a coping mechanism as well of getting through the day. I mean, the bullying was not something I experienced every day, all day, but it was a regular experience. So silence was a kind of friend. It was a kind of aid, if you like, during those times of getting me through the awkward moments. I would hide away in classrooms during lunchtime. I would do a lot of things to avoid having those experiences. It wasn't that I wanted to hide away. I didn't want to hide away necessarily, but silence was my way of getting through. It helped me get through those experiences, and I felt that through the years, it's helped me, and I've learned to use silence and live with it because it is uncomfortable for me even now to say that there is a part of me that is silence, that I am a lot in silence. And people have often remarked that I am often quiet, and they will remark on it in a way that's positive. Like they'll say, you have a grounding silence, you have a grounding presence around you when I'm with you. And there's also been negative connotations of silence, which is the conclusion that because you're quiet, you don't have anything going on upstairs. So, and it's like having an animal which you've had to tame over the years because it is a wild animal, silence, if you think about it. It's like something we all have to tame because we all live with it. It's there around us, and we do so many things And technology has the blessing of having given us even more things to get away from that silence. And that's what my work brings to people is it's like saying, don't worry, it's not going to bite. It's just, you just got to sit with it. I'm inviting you to sit with it, get used to it, and make love to it, for want of a better phrase, and reconcile yourself with that silence. And through that reconciling with yourself with silence, you're kind of reconciling with yourself. You're kind of getting to know yourself back, coming back to yourself, and facing those things that are uncomfortable. I was facing the bullying through that silence. I was going, this is happening. This is for real. Because to begin with, I thought it was just a bit of fun on my expense, fine. And then it became clear that it wasn't. And then it became an experience that I went through. And yeah, sure, I come to question, was it really bullying, or was it just tit for tat? Was it just a bit of fun on my expense? So science has helped me sort of process that as well. And the metaphor that I use for that is watching my mum wash the rice, because she had rice. We'd have rice literally every day growing up. I mean, being Japanese, rice is her religion, right? So she would wash the rice with a colander time and time again. And it's kind of that metaphor of science. You use science to process things. And to close on this is I get people to come to my sessions with the invitation to explore something that's going on in their life that they want to look at, that they're not looking at. And they might say, oh, I just want to enjoy the silence. But some people come with an exact intention. And it's that metaphor of using silence to filter the intention, the experience, the thing they want to overcome or face. Because silence helps us to face things. And when we don't want to, that's where silence is uncomfortable. And that's where it remains the wild animal that we don't tame, if you like.
Mm.
And then some people come out of the sessions, the work I do, with breakthroughs, with experiences that they weren't expecting, but they can only do that in silence. We can't do anything unless we have that space to do it in.
I remember years ago, I was talking to my brother, and I don't remember what the conversation was, but I do remember at some point he said, sometimes I wonder if you just don't like gaps in the conversation, if you can't sit in that quiet
Mm,
in a conversation. And I had to really think about that. I wasn't sure how I felt about it because I didn't feel like I was talking for the sake of talking.
mm,
But I wonder if I was just filling it with noise. And it wasn't until 2020 when here I am in Montana, where we had a lot of luxury that people in cities didn't have.
mm,
I have this mountain behind my house, and I could actually hike with friends because it was outdoors. We could distance without a problem and still talk without wearing
yeah.
masks. I had a lot of luxury that a lot of my friends and family didn't. And it was in that time I've always enjoyed time by myself, but I realized how important that solitary time had become to me because I ended up surrounding myself with lots of people that year by hiking with them or by taking them with me on a hike using FaceTime so that
Yes.
they could experience the hike with me because they were stuck inside. And I know the neuroscience benefits when when we do that. And what I remember kind of having a big aha moment that I missed the solitary time
Yes.
of hiking by myself. And I always thought of myself as more of a people person.
Yeah.
So I wonder if, well, I know for me, as I got older, I started being a lot more comfortable being by myself, being alone without being lonely.
Mm,
And then I read the book, The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter, and he talked about there's a whole chapter on quiet, on the fact that it's almost impossible to find a place on our planet without any man made noise, without any
mm,
noise.
yeah.
And I realized that a lot of people, I come back to that first conversation with my brother, a lot of people are uncomfortable with the quiet, as you said, because they have something in their head that is bothering them and they don't necessarily want to explore it.
Exactly, yeah.
So, without naming names, of course, because your
Yeah.
clients are, they
Yeah.
have a right to that privacy. Can you tell us a story about that kind of experience that a client might have had and how you helped them find a way to approach it without being afraid of it, if that makes sense?
Um, I'll just sort of summarize the experiences that the clients I've worked with have had. And I would say the they'll come with X intention into the session, procrastination, redundancy, um, enjoying the silence, a lot of things going on in their lives, and they want to sort of, like, again, wash those things through the silence. And I think one of the most magical was that one of the first sessions I did was um, this guy in Costa Rica who I did a session with online, and he said, "Oh, I don't want to go back to my life now." And that was like, wow, he couldn't face the reality of going back to life, having had that session. It's like coming back from a lovely weekend or a lovely holiday, isn't it? And it's going, oh, back to work, back to reality, back to the grindstone, back to the hamster wheel. And he what he took as uh, was actually a win, because he'd actually managed to gain clarity on the fact that there is something in his life that wasn't gelling for him, that wasn't aligned for him, that wasn't working for him. And we get into our lives so easily, these routines, these habits, these ticks, these jobs, these whatever relationships, and we put up with them, and we sort of have our head in the steering wheel, as they say in French. And it's crazy how we get sucked into that. And it's only by having a space again to sort of step back and go, oh, actually, that's what's wrong, or there is something wrong, even if it's just not able to put a figure on it. It's being able to have a science space to just sit back and look at your life as if you're looking at a painting.
I consider that taking inventory.
Yes.
And I think not enough of us do that. As you
Yeah.
said, we just get kind of stuck in this
Yeah.
routine and obligations.
Yeah.
So this man or this client in Costa Rica,
Mm.
the uh, that that moment, it sounds to me like that's the realization that he's going to have some conflict when he gets
Yes.
back in order to change whatever it is that he awakened.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how
And
do you do that? Like I
how do I
know
do that?
when I think
I
about how hard
sorry.
it is, right,
Yeah.
to make a change, even when you know that something has to change, you have to have this
Mm.
conversation. How does being in that silence help you take the next step once you've taken that inventory and identified the problem?
Well, how I do it is I get people to do three things, I would say. I get people to breathe. I get people to move their bodies in very simple ways. I get people to go gently into silence, because I don't believe in throwing people in the deep end with silence unless they have a kind of rigid, structured, disciplined personality, in which case I throw them in the deep end, because then there's more challenge and there's more magic coming out for them if I do that. So those three things combined allow that person to relax the nervous system. It allows them to feel connected to their bodies, come back to their bodies, and not just be in their heads, but also just feel elastic, feel easy, and yeah, relaxed. And then once you reach in that state, you're able to contemplate those uncomfortable things going on in your life without running away, without running to your phone, because you've overcome that fear of silence, you've tamed that silence, your body is relaxed, and you're able to face it better. And the key for me, and this is the challenge I have doing the sessions, is I can't, my job is not to coach them, therapy them, tell them what to do, think I know better than them. No, I'm just guiding them through the silence, which is the real um, tool here. I'm just giving them the chance to use that tool because I want them ultimately to take back control of their lives, because obviously when we're not in control of our lives, that's when we get into these hamster wheel routines and habits and we just lose track of everything. So silence is again bringing people back to their core essence and who we are. And then we're just so much easier it's easier for us rather to confront these areas, if that
Hmm.
answers your question.
Yeah, I think so. When I think about when I make a change, it's only when I'm comfortable in my skin and
Mm,
clear that that change is absolutely necessary.
yeah,
Then it still isn't pleasant. It's
yeah.
still not something that I'm going to go, oh yeah, I get to go home and have a confrontation. Like
I mean,
that's not the thing.
I'm
But
just to give you a flavor. My work is my work, but when I look at my wife's work, she uses full body intuition to make a decision, and I'm like, wow, because there's me thinking of deciding things in my head, or sitting in silence, or listening to classical music, or whatever it takes for me to get inspiration. Whereas I look at my wife, who's able to use her full body intuition to make a decision. She won't make a simple decision without making sure that all of her body is in agreement. But that's what we should all do, ideally. That when we make a decision, when we decide to stop something, start something, we are all body and mind behind it. And that's what my work is about. Fundamentally, it's connecting this bit, which takes so much of the weight of what we do in our lives, and we forget this bit.
so the
Self
head versus the rest
head
of your
cannot
body.
head alone cannot decide, we cannot just rely on this bit, this part of our body. If we ignore this, it will decide things for us, and not
Mm.
necessarily in a nice way.
Oh,
Uh, and
yes.
I say that because from experience, because my dad died of pancreatic cancer 5 years ago. And pancreatic cancer does not appear from nowhere. It doesn't happen for no reason. I believe from the reading and research and questioning I've done since he died, the pancreatic cancer was his body saying to him, "You've held so much back. You've held so much emotional charge back. I can't take it anymore. Sorry." And the body lets go. It can't take anymore. So cancer is a body's way of saying, "Sorry, mate, I can't do this
So
anymore."
it's collected the
Over the
um,
years, he was holding back so much
mm,
stoicism, you can call it, holding so many emotions back, so many maybe desires, dreams, regrets. And yeah, and that's why I think my work is important to the world, without being arrogant or whatever. It's important to the world because it's giving people a chance to, it's an early warning system, my work. Just as your work or anyone's work in the personal development sphere is helping people to live longer by giving them an early warning system on things that are potentially going to crop up later, like body
so
work.
I like this idea of expression being part of your health. I
Yes.
like this especially because I recently had a conversation with a friend who went through cancer treatment. She was only I don't know, 35 or something when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And she went through the treatment and she told me, she said, "Sarah, cancer changes you."
Mm.
And she said it changes the person that's going through it and it changes their collective community, the people that are caring for them in significant ways. And in my recent experience being a caregiver, I can see that, at least in this case, um, the person has become a lot more expressive,
Mm.
and making this effort to tell people what they're feeling,
Yeah.
to eh, um, and to express their own feelings in different
Yes.
ways. And I really appreciate that. I can see how holding back that expression, holding back your anger, holding back frustration or sadness, not taking inventory because you don't know that that's what you're holding back,
Yeah.
and how that can create a physical manifestation of
Mm.
that stress in
Yeah.
different ways, heart disease
Yeah.
and cancers. No, that's a really interesting concept. So when you think about your your wife's approach versus yours, I love coming back to this idea of washing the rice, using silence as the water that goes through the rice and
Yeah.
seeing what filters out.
What's left? Yeah.
Yeah, what's left in the grid, in the mesh. So when was something I'm immediately coming to my own experience of using
Yeah.
silence to get to that point, and I do it often. As I said, as I hike, I find that as I'm going up the mountain, I'm getting I'm gaining a lot of elevation because the mountain is about 1,000-foot climb to the summit,
Wow.
and it doesn't it's only a few miles. It's only like 2 miles to get to the top,
Yeah.
but I don't always go to the top, but I always have to go up because it's a mountain.
Mhm.
So there's always elevation gain. And what I find is that if I don't get my heart rate up early, then it doesn't leave me with my head clear enough to be open for inspiration.
Okay.
So, and I only discovered that a few years ago because I was walking on the beach every day for a month and I
Yeah.
didn't get the same kind of clarity as I do when I'm on the mountain. I have to get my heart rate up. And then it always leaves something behind, little nuggets of inspiration or aha moments about my own pain, something that
Mm.
needs to change, some way that I need to approach a conflict or potential for something good.
Yeah.
So tell us a story about a time when that happened for you, when you experienced that silence and it left behind the nuggets of wisdom or inspiration that you needed.
Um, I think the memory that comes back to me in that respect is about 20 years ago. I went cycling in southwest England. It was during university holidays, and I went for it. There was actually a walk. It was raining like cats and dogs, so I didn't go cycling. I went walking instead. And I went up. I didn't go up a steep mountain like what you've got in Montana, but I went up this steep hill in southwest England, and it was steep, and it was misty. The rain was coming, and the higher I went up, the more I couldn't see ahead of me. And I was, oh my God, am I going to make it back to the bed and breakfast I was staying at? Where am I? All I could hear was sheep. There was no one, no dogs, no people. It was like complete silence. It was completely fog. I looked behind me, but I didn't want to look behind me because there was a sharp drop behind me to the sea, to the beach. And yet that walk turned into it must have been 3 hours just walking through fog, muddy fields, the odd signpost, but no one. I met two people on that walk in the space of 3 hours, but that was it. And during that walk, I managed to think about all the stuff I'd been through in my life. And one of the things that obviously came up was the bullying experience, which was only 5 years after that walk, before that walk. So not that that wasn't that long ago before at the time. And it was like a magical walk because I managed to process bullying. It was one of the first times when I was able to just be at one with all that experience and just take some of the layers of pain of it away and just forgive those things, forgive those times, and not be a victim about it either. And just feel, even if it meant feeling a bit like having vanquished the bullies by being on that walk, it was processing, it was taking the layers of pain away. A bit like the layers of cake you have in France. You have a millefeuille cake, which is multiple layers of cream. So it was like taking the layers off, even if not all the layers, because there was still a lot of rawness and stuff. And then when I got to the end of the walk and civilization, I was actually happy to rejoin civilization because I'd been through that silence and I had one of the most wonderful walks I've ever had in my life.
Mm.
My feet were soaking wet and I was just glad to get to the nearest pub when I got to wherever it was and see the first dog walker. But I'd been through this foggy, misty silence and it was just great. And it's something I'll never forget.
Oh, that sounds absolutely magical. It
And
was
I'll
as
do
if
it
I
again
was
when I get my silence retreats going. I will go back to that kind of area of England, hopefully, and get people to walk or be in that kind of. It wasn't the most isolated, remote part. It wasn't the Reese Witherspoon film Wild. And it's true, you cannot find. It's difficult to find proper lonely silence spots, but you can find silent spots, and that was one of them.
wow. I could feel like I was on that hike with you,
Mm.
partly because, just a couple years ago, I was in Portland, Oregon, and went on a hike that was very foggy, and we gained a lot of elevation, and my my guide stopped because he said he was afraid of heights, and he said, "I'm just gonna stay here. You can go as far as you want and then come back." And I said, "Okay." And I kept going.
Yeah,
And, so your story reminded me of that. I was with somebody else. I didn't get the same chance, but I remember the feeling of walking up into the fog
yeah,
and being okay with that, like,
yeah,
not being able to see exactly where I was going as long as I could see my next step. I
yes.
knew I was okay. Ah, what a great story. Oh my
I came,
gosh.
I came close to that in Northern California about 10 years ago now, when I was working for a company who was based in Sunnyvale, and just going into the fog from the hot sun at the beach.
Mm.
That was that came close to it. It's a
How old
beautiful
were
path.
you? How old were you when you did that 3-hour hike in
Oh, that
Southwest England?
was 1999, so 26 years ago. So yeah, I was probably 20. I'm
Yeah.
26 now. So
Yeah, okay, so it had only been because you were saying it had only been about 5 years from
yeah,
that bullying experience. Um, I keep coming back to this idea that those 3 hours were this magical experience that actually inform everything you do now.
yeah. It was the science retreat for me, and it was. I didn't know at the time. I didn't think. I had never thought I would do something with science. Never. I mean, I didn't imagine myself doing what I do now. I just thought I was going to be a journalist or a writer or whatever the other things going on. But
Mhm.
but it's funny that you do something like that 20 years before you become it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
The
that's the
precursor.
best quotable line right there. It's funny how you do something 20 years before you become it.
Yeah.
Ah, we're gonna have to hang on to that quote. That's really good. Well, I think it's really important for people to look back and see those pivotal moments in their
Yes.
lives and see the pattern of how it got you to where you are. partly because it gives us the confidence and um, inspiration to go forward if we know
Mm.
that what we're doing now could have that similar effect 10 years from now or 20 years from now, to be able to see what we're doing now as a pivotal time. For me, it helps with resilience and persistence.
Yes.
Looking at the evidence that something that happened 20 years ago, I worked my way into becoming.
Yeah. And that was the beginning of the healing, I guess, for me, because it took me a lot of time to get through that, to process all that. And that meant contacting the bullies, and it's psychotherapy. It meant a lot of writing. It meant a lot of getting things out. But that was the journey that I have been on, and that walk was one of the nicer parts of it.
It's not unusual for people to have those um, hugely inspiring, motivating experiences in that long, like a
Oh yeah.
marathon,
Mm.
or the what is the big walk that people do through? Is it Spain?
Yeah, Compostela,
Yes. Uh,
Santiago de Compostela.
yes, I have quite a few friends, at least 10 friends who have done part or all of that walk,
Yeah.
and they all come back changed. So when you're working with your clients, it's not like all of us can do that even once a year, much less once in a lifetime. What do you recommend to them that they can do in a shorter amount of time and still have a significant impact?
Um, I would say, and this is what I'm practicing myself, is being in complete silence when someone talks to you and not respond or react straight away. And I'm learning still about that, because giving that pause, that buffer before you invest in answering a question or listening to someone and then responding to them, even if it's your partner, your business partner, if you can bring silence into those moments, and I'm learning that now, that's that's that that is that is a great step to take, I think, because it's releasing ourselves of the lifetime obligation that we seem to have of thinking we have to reply straight away to something,
Mm.
to when someone talks.
Or
And
texts
people will
or
listen to you.
emails.
Yeah, people will listen to you and take notice of you if there is that silence between them. Not to leave the pause too long either, but there being a pause, they're not releasing ourselves of that feeling that we have to reply, we have to respond, we have to talk, we have to fill the spaces, we have to fill the silence. That's what exhausts us more than we think. It's
Mm.
releasing ourselves of so much weight, I think, and and that's what being called quiet. My wife saying to me all these years, "Where were you tonight?" It's because that's what I was crafting without knowing, that ability to just not talk straight away or talk at all. If I don't want to talk, don't talk. It's giving science that opportunity to infiltrate our lives for the better.
That reminds me of two things, or two things popped up in my head as you were saying that. One is that when you don't respond right away,
Yeah.
you are also sending a signal to the person in front of you that you are considering what they said.
Yes. Yeah.
And that is meaningful right
Yeah.
there. It strengthens relationships when people think you're really can see that you're really listening. The other thing that popped into my head is the Viktor Frankl quote about there being space between stimulant and response, and in that space
Mm.
is our freedom to choose. I'm paraphrasing here.
Yeah.
And I use that a lot in my coaching. Remember, you don't have to respond right away. And I think on top of that, many years ago, one other thing that popped into my head is that I had been in the habit of writing an email and hitting send. And I have a tendency to be a little on the impulsive side.
Mm.
So I look at it, I think it's fine. I hit send. I don't necessarily use my other talents, like my StrengthsFinder talent, strategic's my number one talent, and I'm not always using that to make sure that what I'm sending is strategic
Yeah.
or thoughtful. And my husband years ago said, "Give it the 24-hour rule."
Mm.
And even now, if I get a text message that I feel in my body, especially if it's a negative feeling, I give myself time to respond.
Yeah.
And I think more of us our relationships across the board would benefit significantly if we practice that more
Yeah.
often. Mm, wow, that's powerful. I thought you were going to say something about finding silence in your day. And
Mm. Well,
that's
that we
where,
can all do quite easily, but I think
yeah, but
that was I
your,
wanted to
your,
mention.
yes, your comment of finding silence in a conversation, I think is far more um, unusual in
It's
terms of guidance.
Yeah, it's a learning curve for me, especially, well, as for many people, I imagine, because there's that inbuilt experience of argu arguments in our families when we were growing up and all that, any violence there was, which makes it that we want to control the conversation, so we react straight away, and it's actually healing stuff to do that, putting silence in for ourselves as much as for other people.
Mm, definitely, especially if it's somebody we care about.
Mm.
Wow. Christopher, this has been such a great conversation. I've really
I
enjoyed
certainly
hearing
enjoyed
your
it.
stories.
Yeah.
And now every time I see a train, I'm going to think of you.
Oh, okay.
We see a lot of trains here in Montana. So,
Okay.
wow. This has been such an unexpected experience. I knew it would be entertaining. I knew that you would have some great insights. But overall, you've said some things that were really unexpected for me, and I really
Well,
appreciate hearing them.
thank you. My pleasure.
So, listeners, just so you know, Christopher's links, all the contact information that he shared with me, will be in the show notes associated with this episode at elkinsconsulting.com. Thanks again, Christopher. I really appreciate your
Thank you.
time. All right, listeners, it's your turn. Where will you find silence? Will you take moments in a conversation, in the middle of a conversation, especially if it's via text, to give yourself time to consider what's next? Will you take inventory, taking opportunities to walk away from a situation, maybe sit and drink a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and only do that without your phone, without a book in your hand? Maybe sitting on the floor in your room, drinking a cup of tea just to be there, just to take inventory and decide, how do I feel today? Is this how I want to feel today? What might I need to change so that tomorrow I can say that I'm feeling exactly how I want to feel today? Thanks so much for listening to Your Stories Don't Define You. How you
That's
tell
the
them will.
time. You must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile.